Okay. Hi and welcome to this webinar on preparation for the SBI PO exam coming up very soon. So I'll just explain to you guys as to what the process is that we follow in our webinars. First, guys, if you can hear me, then I would suggest just type a yes in the text box that you can see next screen. So once I get a yes from a few more people, then I will start speaking on the specific points related to the exam. So guys, can you just let me know if you guys can hear me right now? Okay, so there are a couple of people who said yes, so I will start off with things. Uh, so what we'll do is I generally take a lot of questions in this webinar. Instead of me giving you very long lectures on what the exam is all about and how to prepare, etc., I'll give you a very brief overview initially about the prelims, and then I would want you guys to ask me questions, which I'll see and I'll keep selecting questions, and then I'll keep answering them over this chat. So that is the way we'll go about it. By the time you guys think about these questions, let me just break up the exam pattern for the SBI prelims. As you all must be knowing, it has three sections: quantitative aptitude, logical reasoning, and verbal ability. The breakup of these sections is 35 minutes for maths or quant, 35 marks, sorry, 35 marks and 35 questions for quant, 35 questions for logical reasoning, and 30 questions for English. So I'm sure you are aware of this part. Now, the total time which you have is hardly 1 hour, which means that you need to answer 100 questions in an hour. Plus, SBI PO is not necessarily comprised of very simple questions. The questions can tend to be slightly more difficult. So here the key factor in any SBI PO prelims or IBPS PO prelims is that you will not be able to attempt all the 100 questions within the exam, which means that question selection within the exam is extremely important. Once you start asking questions, we'll go down to what are the exact kind of questions that are asked and where you can increase your marks. So are there any specific questions at this stage? One thing that you need to keep in mind is that the prelims exam does not have sectional timings, which means that you do not need to focus on number of minutes for quant, number of minutes for reasoning, etc. Whereas once you qualify in the prelims and go for the mains exam, the pattern there has timing for each section, which means that your preparation strategy changes completely. So at this stage, I'll ask you, do you have any questions? Accordingly, we will see as to how I should guide you with respect to each section. So Suraj, Shubham, anybody else who's there on the chat? Guys, any questions, please? Okay, so by the time you guys formulate your questions, let me just take you through the various sections. Let me start with quantitative aptitude, which is basically maths. Difficulty level wise, I would say it is fairly moderate. And you can then, uh, maths is something where you can score a lot more marks compared to reasoning in the prelims exam. What is the typical breakup of maths? Out of the 35 questions, you will generally have 10 questions on data interpretation. Typically, one of those questions will be a table. These tend to be slightly calculation intensive. So your table might have, let's say, 6 colleges, and then you might have the male female breakup, or you might be given 6 colleges, and you would be told that the number of people appearing for and passing in the exam is so and so. Then the questions based on this will be on how many people across given years. So questions will be based on count, or the average value, or the percentage growth, or the ratio, etc. So essentially, because of this, chapters such as averages, ratio proportion, percentages, etc. become very important. The other type of DI questions that you would see are typically bar graphs, line graphs, and pie charts. Bar and pie tend to be more common compared to line. You need to practice a lot of tables, a lot of bar graphs and pie charts. Typically, you can expect 10 questions from these. This is slightly time consuming, but it will give you marks in bulk. You might not need to solve all 10 questions, but you can definitely solve 1.5 sets here. Apart from this, you will have typically 5 to 10 questions on approximation. Last year we had 5 questions, so you might have something to do with surds or BODMAS, or let's say indices, but the value needs to be approximated. So your values may be of the form cube root of 64.0002. Here again, the kind of approximation that you do depends on the options that are given. So if the options are very close by, then you might need to be very careful while approximating. But when you have cubes, cube roots, square roots, again you need to be careful in approximation. But here generally the values will not be very close by. So approximation 5 questions is something you can attempt. Data interpretation is something you should attempt. Then you will have 5 questions on quadratic equations. Now, what happens in quadratic equations is that you will be given 2 quadratic equations, one in the form of x, one in the form of y, and you need to compare their values and see whether x is greater than y, whether x is less than y, whether it's greater than equal to y, and so on. In each question, the instructions may keep varying. So please do not be under the assumption that if x is greater than y, the answer is always option 1. That is not necessarily true. These questions can be solved quickly using certain shortcuts that we have also given in the material, or by using factorization, which all of you have studied earlier. So this is something that again you should definitely attempt. You will have 5 more questions on number series, which is complete the series or find the odd man out, etc. These tend to be difficult, and in an exam scenario, these tend to be what I call tukka questions, as in they tend to be hit or miss questions. If they click, they click. Otherwise, there is no way you can solve them very quickly in the exam. So I generally would not attempt these questions at the first attempt. If I look at a series and it becomes obvious that, oh, iska answer aise aise hoga, let's say the series is 10, 26, 50, 82, then I know that it is of the form 3 square plus 1, 5 square plus 1, 7 square plus 1, etc. So the last one will be 11 square plus 1, which is 122. So those are easy, but often you don't get easy questions. The average LOD of such questions is generally moderate to difficult. So series or odd man out question is something I would skip. The rest of the questions are 10 questions on pure maths. These questions are mainly based on averages, ratio, mixture allegation, profit and loss, percentages, simple and compound interest. Then you have on ages. The ratio of ages of 2 people was 5:7, then it became 10:12, whatever. So all these questions can be practiced. In general, in maths, out of the 35 questions, I would say quadratic equations, pure maths, approximation, and DI is what you should target. typically you can keep 20 minutes for maths and try to attempt approximately 18 to 20 questions. That if you do that with very high accuracy, of course you can always attempt more questions, but then your accuracy will go down. So even if you attempt 18 to 20 questions in around 20 to 22 minutes, it is a very good attempt if your accuracy is above 90%. You cannot attempt 18 questions with a 50% accuracy and be happy about it. Now let's move on to the LR section. LR typically has questions in groups of 5. So here selecting the right group to attempt is very, very, very important. What are the groups that you will have? Generally, 25 questions out of 35 in last year's SBI were based on various kinds of arrangements. What are the common arrangements that you have? One which you all will nearly always have is a circular arrangement. The most common is 8 people, with some people facing inwards, some people facing outwards. You may or may not be given the number of people who are facing in or out, but that you can expect that some of them will be facing in or out. Apart from this, you might have a second parameter given, such as the city or their hobby or the place that they come from, or there might be a relation based parameter. So the relation of various people with each other is given. Sometimes you might even have a question where everybody's relation is given with respect to A or B or C, etc. These tend to be quite difficult, so this should not be your first attempt. The second kind of arrangement question that you will face, which will typically be a floor arrangement question, which means that you will have a building with 7 or 8 floors, and you will be given the number of people staying on each floor. Typically it's one person, plus they have another parameter. Again, it could be their hobby, profession, their college, city, etc., color, etc. And you need to find out who stays on which floor and what is the relevant parameter. Sometimes a variation in these kind of questions is that there are 8 floors, but there are 7 people because one floor is vacant. So that increases the complexity slightly. In general, floor arrangement questions tend to be simpler. So you should try and attempt these questions. This will give you marks. The third type of arrangement questions are linear arrangement, which can be of many types. So I'll briefly tell you about the types. One is a simple linear arrangement where the people are sitting in a straight line. Typically, you will have 8 people, either all facing north or all facing south, or some north, some south. You might also have one more parameter given, same color, city, etc. That is one. The other is when you have 2 rows of people. This is a very common question type. You may have 2 rows of people, 5 people in one row, 5 people in the other, and then they may be facing each other. So either you will be told who are the 5 people facing north, who are the 5 facing south, or you will need to find out. You may or may not have an extra parameter. This is moderately difficult but can be attempted before circular arrangement. The third type of linear arrangement is a scheduling question. What I mean by a scheduling question is that things happen one after the other. So you might have 7 days of the week and 7 lectures to be arranged by 7 different professors, that kind of a thing. Or there are 7 trains starting from the same station at different times, or passing through a station at different times, etc., etc. Or movies that are to be shown, one on Monday, one on Tuesday, etc. So that is again a linear because things are being arranged one after the other instead of next to each other. The last type of arrangement question that you have is complex arrangements. Now, what exactly is complex arrangement? Complex means that you have, apart from the name of the person, you have at least 2 other parameters. So, for instance, you might have the name of the person, the bank in which he works, the city where he comes from, and the car that he drives. And this may be given for 7 people. So you may need to fill up 28 different columns or 28 different cells. 7 people, 7 cities, 7 colors, 7 banks, etc. This can come in various categories. 8 people, 3 parameters, 7 people, 3 parameters. Typically, SBI will give you 7 to 8 people. This tends to be slightly complicated, but the good part is if you solve the first question correctly, typically you should be able to get all 5 right. So generally there are 5 sets on arrangements, which is 25 questions. You should try to target 3 sets. What are the remaining 10 questions? There will be 5 questions based on inequalities. What I mean by inequalities is you will be given certain lines such as A greater than B less than C, T greater than E equal to F, G greater than equal to H less than equal to I, and so on. And then you'll need to find the relation between say B and I, C and D, etc. So there again it's a little bit like what you saw in quadratic equations where you need to identify how those two parameters are related. It's a very simple logical question. The important part is to see how the instructions are framed. Sometimes you might have common instructions where it says if A is greater than B, mark option 1. If it is less, mark option 2, and so on. Sometimes each comparison is given in the options. So for question 1, you might have mark option 1 if A greater than B, option 2 if A less than equal to B. Whereas the next question might have mark option 1 if the relation cannot be established. So for every question, the options might change and you will need to look at it accordingly. These are relatively simple. These can be done last because they are individual questions. So even if you are not able to do all 5, you can do 1 or 2, 2 or 3 and still proceed. If you are not very comfortable with, let's say, arrangements, then you should definitely start with this and get all 5 marks. Last year, apart from this, there was a small set of 2 questions on direction sense. When I say direction sense, what it means is that you were given certain instructions that a person starts, goes in this direction, then goes in that direction, so on, so on, so on. There is this whole path. So you need to draw a diagram which shows the path that he has taken. Then there will be questions. What is the distance between points A and C? Or in which direction is he with respect to his original place, etc. Very easy, should be solved. Again, last year there was one set on coded relationships, which means that you were given that A hash B implies A is the father of B, A dollar B means A is the wife of B, and so on. These tend to be difficult. These also tend to be time consuming. So this should be done at the end if you have time. Typically, if you should try and do 2 to 3 arrangement sets, the inequalities question and some of the other puzzles that you are comfortable with. Again, anywhere around 17 to 18 questions in 25 to 26 minutes is a very good attempt. So 20 minutes for, so I have questions from some people here. Somebody saying, tell me about maths, what should be my time strategy? So 2-3 people have asked for quant, which I just explained. A couple of people have asked for time management. So there I would say, summarizing whatever I've said so far, approximately 19 to 21 minutes, 20 minutes for quant. Usme try and attempt 17-18 questions. 25 minutes for LR. Again try and attempt 17-18 questions. But in both, as much accuracy as possible. Somebody has asked what are the important topics in quant. So in quant, you need to look at the whole of arithmetic, which is averages, percentages, ratio proportion, mixtures, simple compound interest, profit loss, variation, time distance, time work, linear equations, questions on ages, P and C probability, and mensuration, which is surface area and volume. Apart from DI and quadratic equation. In LR, you need to look at various kinds of arrangements, which is circular, linear in a single row, linear in 2 rows, floor arrangement, time scheduling, complex arrangements, etc. Apart from this, you need to look at direction sense, you need to look at relationships, inequalities. Occasionally, you might have a set on sentence coding. What is sentence coding? The sentence might be Gaurav is good, is coded as cat, bat, rat. And the other sentence might be Rohit is bad, is coded as cat, zat, mat, kind of a thing. So accordingly, you need to identify which word is coded as which code, that kind of a thing. These were the two sections that we discussed so far, which is Quant and LR. Finally, I move to verbal, which has the least number of questions, which is 30, and is often the simplest as far as questions is concerned. See, understand that in bank exams, the real test is on the Quant and LR part. In verbal, they are just trying to check whether you have basic comfort with English. So what is the breakup? Last year, there was one passage of 10 questions, followed by one set of 5 questions in a closed passage. A closed passage is a mixture of RC and fill in the blanks. You have a paragraph in which there are 5 words which are missing. So they are marked as A, B, C, D, E. Against E, you will be given against A, you will be given 5 options, and you need to identify which word will be the most appropriate. Same logic for B, then for C, then for D and E. It tests your reading skills to a large extent. So that way you need to definitely practice as many closed passage questions as you can. In fact, closed passages, you can even look it up on our website where it will be available. And there you can practice the closed passage chapter and understand how to do it. This generally gives you 5 marks. Then you have 5 questions on fill in the blanks, where each blank has, or each question has 2 blanks. So you need to identify the 2 words that will fill those 2 blanks. Again, this is reasonably simple. This can be done. You have 5 questions on identifying the error. Grammatical ho sakta hai, it can be based on tense, which is present tense, past tense, future, etc. It can be based on gender, singular, plural. It can be based on, gender as in male, female. It can be based on number, that is singular, plural. It can be based on other grammatical concepts such as subject-verb agreement, tense error, parallelism error, modifier error, etc. So there are various kinds of concepts here. But this is something that again comes from a lot of reading. You read a sentence and you realize that it is not. So you need to identify the part of the sentence which is incorrect. This again is something you should try. Then you have 5 questions on jumbled sentences. This typically appears as a set. So you have a paragraph where you have 5 sentences or 6 sentences given to you, and they are presented in a jumbled manner. So you need to put all of them in a sequence. And then based on that sequence, you need to identify which is the first sentence, which is the second, which is the third, and so on. So here again, if you are able to crack it, you will get 5 marks. If you are not able to crack it, you might get 0 marks. So this is more of a hit and miss kind of a thing. Last but not the least, as I said, you have an RC. Typically, the RC is not very tough. Last year, the topic was on economics. Generally, you have 6 questions which are factual in nature. 1 or 2 might be inferential. But you have 6 factual questions. So the data is present in the RC. You need to just search it, answer the question. And there are typically 3 to 4 questions which are vocabulary based. Now, what would the vocabulary questions in an RC be? In the RC, they might mark a word, let's say strategy. So they'll make it bold and ask you, okay, based on this passage, what is the word that is closest in meaning to strategy? So that is synonym. Or what is the word that is most opposite in meaning to strategy, which is antonym. So that way, you will get 3 to 4 words, and you need to make the passage according to those words. You need to answer the passage according to those words. So this is the breakup of the verbal section. Here, ideally, you should always attempt close, mark the error, and fill in the blanks. Apart from this, if you can attempt anything else, it is excellent. Generally, the cutoff for prelims has been in the 40s, as far as I know. So here, in 15 minutes, it is very highly likely that you can attempt 20 questions. So if I break up the three sections, maths 20 minutes, 17 or 18 questions, LR 25 minutes, 17 questions, and English remaining whatever is the time, 20 questions. Come say come. So that gives you 55 good attempts. If you can do even this much with nearly 90% accuracy, you can expect a call for the mains. But if you attempt 55 questions with 75% accuracy, then it becomes very difficult to get a call for the main. So this is the broad breakup for the PO prelims exam. If you have any questions as far as prelims are concerned, please do let me know. Yeah, so somebody's come up with a question saying in the upcoming SBI exams, what will be the approximate weightage of arrangements? As I said, it will be anywhere around 20 to 25 questions. That is my estimate based on last year. Of course, nobody can guarantee anything. The pattern can even change, but you need to be prepared that you will have at least 4 to 5 sets. Is there negative marking? Yes, there is negative marking. It is explained in the ad that you have in the SBI the SBI advertisement or the PDF that they release as the ad. I believe it is 1/4 negative marking. See, generally the negative marking is always based on the number of options. So since there are 5 options, it is 99.9% it is 1/4 negative marking. Sectional cutoffs, yes, there are sectional cutoffs. Again, last year, if you see, IBPS had released its cutoff. I'm not very sure if SBI had released its cutoff, but you can look at IBPS to get an idea as to what kind of sectional cutoffs you can expect. But they are quite low, so it's not that you cannot clear them. Okay, Suraj, where to learn tips and tricks for quant? Suraj, at this stage, getting new tips and tricks won't be very helpful. You will need to practice more and more mocks. And when you practice the mock, look at the solution and then see how you can you could have solved it faster. Some of the common tips that you need to keep in mind that depends for every question in quant is look at whether you can eliminate certain options based on the question itself. Then in certain questions, try and see if you can substitute the value from the option and answer the question. Certain cases, for example, let me just give you an example. Let's say if you're looking at an average question and you need to, need to find the average for something, then the average is always going to be between the greatest and the smallest value. So if any of the values is in the options is equal to greatest or smallest or is outside that range, then you can directly eliminate that. This is just one tip, but there are a lot of tips like this. So see if you can eliminate certain options, see if you can substitute the value and solve the question. If you cannot remember formulae, then try and remember how that formula is derived. Sometimes I do that in the exams, that I might not remember a certain formula for, let's say, replacement of liquid. So I try it out for one value with easy percentage, say 10%. I even do that for compound interest. मुझे हमेशा formula याद नहीं रहता. So sometimes I do it with a 10% and 2 years and easily calculate. Then I know that, okay, this is the right formula. Okay, Shubham is asking, when do we get to know how many marks we scored? See, Shubham, typically the difference between the prelims and the mains is 5 weeks, which is approximately 30 to 35 days. So, what they do is nearly 2 weeks after your exam, 2 to 2.5 weeks after your exam, they release the marks that you got and whether you have cleared the prelims or not. So, 2 to 3 weeks is what I predict. Suraj says my calculation is good, but my approach is longer. So Suraj, again, this will come from practice. Once you solve more and more questions of the same type, let's say, let me give you an example. If you solve time and work, now if my question is A does it in 5 days, B does it in 6 days, if you keep doing 1 by 5, 1 by 6, then your approach will be longer. If you use the LCM of the work, then it becomes shorter. So when you solve the questions, you will need to figure out as to what is the faster way to solve these questions. Okay, newer question: how to solve linear arrangement quickly. What I do is when I see any arrangement questions, generally bank exams give the clues in such a way that you will get two cases initially, and then you will need to keep filling clues, and one case will get eliminated. So what I do is I start by making two diagrams next to each other or above below each other, and I start filling the clues in both diagrams. So suppose the question is one of the clues is A is 3 places away from B. So in one figure I will put A as third to the left of B, and in the other figure I'll put him third to the right of B, and then I'll start filling the other clues accordingly. So within 2 or 3 clues, or maximum 4 clues, one case gets eliminated. That is how I'm able to solve it faster. This applies even to circular, applies to multiple row questions, applies to floor questions, any arrangement question. But always try and start by making a figure. Then, our SBI PO prelims are of the same level as the exam. That is, yes, what we confidently say, because they are based on what we saw in the paper last year. Also, in terms of UI, etc., we confidently feel that it is similar to the actual exam UI, because we have seen the UI and replicated. Suraj, I don't understand your question. EL error related question, English language error. Okay. So if they are English language error, the kind of errors that I mentioned earlier were gender, which is male, female, tense, past, present, future, number, so one, many, etc. Then you have errors in what is called parallelism. So let's say I give you a sentence that I had to go to the market for buying something, etc., for something. So if I keep introducing all these fors, then it becomes wrong. Or when I say for my work, buying, and some other related task that we had to do, then again the singular plural error comes, I and we. A very common error that you will see in the exam is number of people. Now, when we use the word number, the correct word with it is. The number of people in this room is 10. Whereas the incorrect statement is number of people in this room are 10. So very often they will do this. So look out for this word, number of people or number of tasks or something. For people with visual disability, does SBI provide extra time? I don't know about screen magnifiers, but I do believe they provide extra time. You will again need to look up their advertisement. They have very clear instructions as to for what kind of disability, what kind of provisions are provided, and what is the procedure. Because more than the provisions, you'll also need to see as to what is a certificate to be taken, or what proof you need to provide, etc. So do look up their advertisement. Suraj says that he finds race replacement easier compared to error. Good. So if you do find that, then that is something that you definitely need to attempt in the exam if you find it. But error is also something that you should try, because in the SBI exam they tend to be simpler. I would say don't ignore it. Okay, Mohammed says what will be the expected cutoff. So Mohammed, my answer to you would be that right now I cannot predict anything, because we don't know what the difficulty level would be. Just to give you an example, last year, IBPS was not very difficult. It was average. Last year, IBPS raised its difficulty level significantly. So the cutoffs drop down. Similarly, last year SBI was average. What they will do this year, again we cannot say. I would say don't go there with expectations of cutoffs because that will hamper your performance. Rather, just focus on giving your best possible performance. Okay, so right now I'll focus more on prelims. As I said, mains is something where you have more or less the same sections: reasoning, maths, DI, English, etc. You apart from that, of course, you have computers and general awareness. For general awareness, you need to focus mainly on banking products, banking terms, terminology. So, you need, for example, you need to know what are the, let's say, what kind of products are launched by, let's say, NABARD or government schemes. You have demonetization, you have all these digitization push that is being done by the government. So, what are the schemes related to it? What are the latest ventures related to it? Those kind SBI and its associate banks have been, like there is a that whole process of merger is going on. So you might have questions on these. So there'll be a lot of current affairs related questions, and these will be based on things happening in the last 6 months, especially in the finance, banking, etc. sector. So there you need to be well prepared. There might be a few static GK questions, trivia, etc., but that is not very important. Plus, beyond the point, you cannot prepare for that. Okay, I have a new question which says, what should be the strategy regarding time allocation? So, as I said earlier, you can divide into three parts: 20 for maths, 25 for LR, and 15 for English. What some people also do, and that is also a good strategy, is initially they keep 15 minutes for each section. So 15 maths, 15 English, 15 LR. Once 45 minutes are up, then they decide as to last के 40 15 मिनट में किस सेक्शन पे फोकस करना है. So there, depending on how their particular exam has gone, they think that okay, I want to get, I've just done okay in maths and LR. Let me increase my marks in English, or I've done excellent in maths and English, but I don't think I'll clear the LR cutoff. Let me focus for 15 minutes in LR. So that is entirely your call. You can take any of these two strategies, but you should practice 2-3 mocks using each strategy. So that makes it 6 to 7 mocks, and then decide what strategy suits you more. Okay, so we have covered a lot of questions here in terms of how to prepare for prelims. Right now, I would not want to confuse you with data on mains because it will affect your strategy for prelims. Because the way to approach, let's say, data interpretation in mains is very different from the way to approach data interpretation in prelims. So we will look at, again interacting for SBI PO mains once you guys clear your cutoffs and you see me again before the mains exam. For the prelims, we've covered nearly everything that was to be covered. I'll just tell you the kind of RC topics that you need to read up on. So look up a lot of stuff on economics, current affairs, government schemes, social issues, then finance, banking, microfinance, etc. you might get some topic from one of these areas. Occasionally there have been reports that fairy tale पूछ लिया, कोई story में से कुछ पूछ लिया, but that happens more at the clerical level than at the PO level. So at the PO level, expect slightly more serious topics. You might not always have the same pattern. So please be prepared. Even if you get some new question, don't get really scared. For instance, there is no rule that says कि syllogism नहीं पूछते. So earlier SBI also used to ask syllogisms. Now this year IBPS introduced a new type of syllogism, which might come in SBI. So that is also possible. Earlier, for example, input-output tracing used to be asked in some exams. Now it is asked mainly in the mains. That does not mean it cannot be asked in the prelims. Okay, so that way you all have to, you need to ensure that you have practiced other question types also. Okay, I have one question that's been asked that should I go for solving more mocks or should I practice each chapter? I would say at this stage, practice more mocks. Based on the mocks, then you can see which chapters to revise. But right now, practicing chapters will not really help because you need to look at mocks and create a strategy. How to solve RCs in less time? Well, you need to increase your reading speed and you need to keep reading in general. Read more articles, go and read articles on the net, go visit various websites, time yourself, see if you have understood the article, try and think of a summary of the article after you have read it, read short stories quickly, etc. So all these will help you increase your reading speed. Apart from that, what I do in RCs is I read it very quickly once, then I go and look at the questions, and based on the questions I go to the relevant part of the RC and try to answer the question. That works for me. Other people have two different strategies. One is first read the whole RC in detail, then look at the questions. Some people first look at the questions and then directly start reading the RC. So again, it depends on what technique suits you. For that, you need to have practiced at least 10 to 12 papers so that you can try out various techniques in each paper. So I believe this answers most of the questions of the related to the test. So at this stage, I'll wish you all the very best and do well in the exam. And we'll see you once you guys clear the prelims and